what's up? Red Panda Anthem. Red Panda, what's good?
All right, another legendary episode of the legendary Market Monday show. We are live from Wall Street.
Familiar place.
Yes, yes.
They brought out the red carpet.
Yes, yes.
Literally.
So first and foremost, we have to thank the gentleman that's made this possible, Peter Tuchman, the Einstein of Wall Street, the most photographed man in Wall Street history.
History.
Yes. So we'll tell this story later on, but first and foremost, thank you. Talk to the mic.
Absolutely my honor to sit with you gentlemen.
And, of course, we got a friend of the program. You might know him, familiar face. Wall Street Trapper is in the building also.
How fitting.
Trap House jumping, man. Trap House jumping for sure, for sure. Definitely thank Peter. Thank my brothers. It's all love, man.
Wall Street Trapper on Wall Street.
It don't get no better than that, man. The trap is jumping.
Trapping on
The track is jumping.
Trapping ain't dead.
You heard what I said.
We don't know that. It's for another day.
Triple beam is triple beaming. You feel me?
Beam, triple beam.
So we had just a legendary day inside of Wall Street that I want to talk about and kind of bring it outside the street. It's fitting that we're outside the street now because this is where the people are, in the actual street, literatively and figuratively, right? So, Peter, you've been working in this building, New York Stock Exchange, for
37 years.
37 years. So we're going to get into all the information, technical analysis, and all that stuff. But can you explain exactly what you do? Because a lot of people might not fully understand it. And I'd rather you explain it than I explain it.
I'm going to go back to at least my beginning, right? We saw that, and everyone got a sense of it. We just came from talking with people inside the building, right? Talking with people inside the building, and they all said where they got their start. One was delivering coffee, right? Frankie said he was buying lunch for people, right? So the floor of the New York Stock Exchange is made up of brokers. There's 1,564 seats on the stock exchange. Were created in 1903, right? Like a taxi medallion. It gives you the right to trade. And inside the room, you've got brokers who are representing hedge funds, institutions, banks, and stuff like that, and high wealth people. And then you have market makers, right? So the format and the makeup of the room has been the same for 120 years, right? It is an auction market, right? You have buyers, you have sellers, and then you have the market makers who put the people together. So I'm a broker, okay? I came down to the stock exchange in 1985. Some people say 1885. They joke that I went to high school with Alexander Hamilton, but let's say I look good for my age. I came here in 1985 as a teletypist. It didn't matter who my father was. It didn't matter what my background was. You come down to Wall Street, there's no trading for this job. And we talked about that, what makes a good trader, and I'll go into that. So you come down here, you may know someone. Tony Vaughn, Tiffany in the house, what's up? So you come down to Wall Street and you start at the bottom, right? Because it's a matter of being somebody who works on the floor of the stock exchange. Let me go back for a minute. In the 1700s, 200 years before this building was built, they used to trade right out here on Wall Street under a tree called the buttonwood tree. Okay, people were trading commodities, trading stocks, trading business for 200 years before we actually built this building. And in 1787, they created what's called the Buttonwood Agreement. The Buttonwood Agreement was a document that basically traders said to each other, sometimes we may not be transacting money between each other, but we need to establish something called our word is our bond, trust from one buyer to one seller. That when we make a transaction, we are being held to it. It was a matter of trust, honesty, transparency. So that was launched in 17-something. That document, it's upstairs on the 7th floor. And so that started sort of the establishment of the relationship of the auction market. Fast forward to 1903, this building was built. It started with a couple of brokers and a couple of market makers, and it grew as companies. Look, not that many companies were public in 1903, right? The first few, Campbell's Pork and Bean, Hormel, they were making Spam for World War I. We had Union Pacific, the railroads, the companies that built America, right? And it started slowly, and we built it up. There were brokers, market makers, and the support staff around what made the market become what it is today. Obviously, it peaked probably, it's the only human-based marketplace in the world. Right? Back in the day, there were thousands of people down here, open outcry, screaming and yelling, auction market, buying, selling, market makers, creating a smooth and active market. The most exciting place in the world. I came down here in 85 as a teletypist. That was the job where I started. Back then, you would buy stock, sell stock. You would write it down on a piece of paper. I bought 100 shares of XYZ at 39 and a quarter. I'd send it into the booth. The booth would report it upstairs to the desk of the brokerage firm, right? Then they would take that piece of paper, input it into a teletype machine before computers, and then you would create the ticker tape, okay? Then I went to become an option clerk. Oh, so I had a summer job. I said, you know what? The energy here is amazing, right? You can tell I'm a people person. I'm an adrenaline-based communicator, right? And a connector, right? So when I found that energy here on the floor, which was just palpable, right? It was two human beings to each other, right? Engaged in battle. And that was exciting for me. That got my juices flowing. I knew it was the place for me, right? And so I asked if I could stay and get a real job. I became a option clerk, a retail clerk, an institutional clerk, right? Doing different kinds of business. My quest was to have a badge, to have a seat on the New York Stock Exchange. When I got that seat, I got to go upstairs and sign a book. In that book, J.P. Morgan had signed the same book. Carnegie had signed the same book. All of the founders of the Industrial Revolution had signed that same book. It was like Santa Claus's book. You opened it like this. My parents showed up, and you would go back in and see who had signed the book before me, going back to the 1700s. It was unbelievable. And that gave me the power of what goes on in here. Right? What goes on in here, everybody here will often ask, I don't know anything what goes on in the stock market, right? But if you go in there and think, oh, we're the greatest consumer generation in the world, right? We are very loyal consumers. Everybody knows what's going on in there. The Nikes, the Apples, the Alibabas, everything, the Home Depots. You could look at the ticker tape. Everyone's got a relationship with every one of those names going by, right? So I'm a broker. I represent a hedge fund and some traders, okay? And in the old days, there were 1,600 brokers. There were 2,000 market makers. There were 3,000 clerks. There was 2,000 support staff, and the market was wild and crazy. Ever since the technology came into the marketplace, things have changed, right? People have had to reinvent. Some people left, right? People weren't able to figure out how to make themselves add value in an electronic marketplace. We don't see that only here. We see it in every industry. We know that everyone's being outsourced to machines. For me, I'm a real humanist. I learned that from my dad. That's a whole nother story. So when I found my calling here, I decided I would stay under any circumstance. And so to help maintain and be the ambassador for the greatest human marketplace in the world. So that's what I did.
Yeah, I wanted to touch on that because you said at one point you had 10,000 people in that room. And I'm looking and I'm walking around like, how did 10,000 people fit in here? And so you spoke about the technology and how it's changed, right? You said you were a teletrader, which means that you had to write on paper, hand it. I mean, I could just imagine what that looked like in a time when you have 10,000 people and you're fighting over people's shoulders. Can you talk about some of the things that technology has changed in this market?
Okay, so, it was quite an unbelievable experience. So in 1987, so I got there in 85, I was a teletypist clerk. In 1987, we had the crash. It was the largest, still to date, the largest crash in history. Percentage-wise. You always talk about percentages, right? So I don't know, we lost 28% of the market in a day. Now the market was only we're trading at 30,000 now. The Dow was at 600, right? No, it was at 2,000. We lost 680 points that day. Wow. 28% of the market's value on that day. So at that day, there was paper all over the floor. There was screaming and yelling, dogs and cats living together. It was crazy, right? And so people would go, I don't understand how you can find any kind of understanding in this chaos, right? But that's what makes a great broker, right? I thrive on chaos, right? I'm able to look in a room of chaos and identify who I'm doing business with. I could walk into a stock. There were 40 people screaming and yelling, but I knew my purpose. My purpose was to represent my customer and buy 100,000 shares of IBM at the best way I could. So when I went into that crowd, as chaotic as it was, I was listening for the other side of that trade. If I wanted to pay $125 for stock, I waited to hear someone offering me stock at 125. It may be trading all over the place around me. So technology has changed it in a lot of ways. A lot of people didn't survive the change in so many industries, right? We've been outsourced in so many ways. So technology took over a lot of the trading. There's algorithmic trading. The whole nature of the business is different. The way stocks are curated and analyzed and traded is completely different. The way things are reported, the whole blockchain of the event of how when you buy stock and sell stock and the money is transacted. The human element for me, which is why I'm still here, is all the more important. We think that we don't need other human beings, that shit can happen without, we can do it on the back of our cell phone. We can do it through this and that. But we know, you guys know, you are changing the world one person at a time, eye to eye, like this, right? And so in a market that is so volatile, in a world that is so disengaged, right? The human element is all the more important, right? A computer, an algorithm is only as good as the guy who programmed it. The judgment, right? As Glenn Carell inside discussed with you, we used to trade on a gut, right? You guys do that. You have guts with people. You have guts with your education and the way you inspire people. So do I as a trader. So technology has traded a lot. I wish it wasn't here. I still don't own a computer. Right? I'm sort of been resistant of technology. I know that seems weird. I do have an iPhone, but a lot has changed in that way. We are, unfortunately, the last human marketplace.
This that Red Panda Anthem. Ian, what's up? This that Red Panda Anthem. Red Panda, what's good? Red Panda Anthem. Your boy going up. I know they can't stand it.